ードドラゴンは史上最強。お前らちゃんと聞け。
New Tengoku pack just dropped. Quick warning, if you're anime only, close this video immediately. This is not for you. For the reading is fundamental manga homies, let's jump into it together. This chapter was what I was waiting for. A lot happened. We learned more about the Takahara Academy, aka Heaven. We also have some newly confirmed Hiruko, I'm very hype about it. And we give Kiruko a little bit of closure. So chapter 57 is half Mina's X-Men origin story. A quarter of it is Aoshima reminiscing about the good old days and making sure the hat matches the shoes. And then the other quarter is me screaming at my tablet because Sawatari is still the people's doctor, even with the ethical violations. Chapter 57 is entitled Man-Eater, and our cover art is Meena in the Sanctum. As a side note, because of how much foreshadowing Ishiguro puts in the cover art, I inspected this thing for 6 uninterrupted minutes trying to find clues. I didn't learn much from staring at the cover, just created more questions for myself. What I did learn is that I got tricked again. Remember when Ishiguro did this in chapter 17, basically telling us Totori's parents are Taka and Anzu? Or when he did this, basically telling us what happens to Kuku? Well, once again, the big reveal from chapter 57 was heavily foreshadowed with previous cover art, which I'll explain later. Most of this chapter from a storytelling standpoint is a Maru flashback. He's in bed, he's thinking about all the info he learned earlier that day. Remember, Maru killed Anzu's Man-Eater last chapter, and he was talking to Aoshima with Kiruko. From last chapter, which is chapter 56, Aoshima told them Tokyo had twins, which we know is a lie, and that Yamato was at their facility up until about 4 years ago. She also told them a little bit about the disease afflicting Hiruko. Then, Kiruko gets stomach cramps. Lots of discussion in the fandom and the subreddit about whether that was a period cramp or pregnancy cramps. I'm not getting into that here. The flashback from chapter 57 picks up with them continuing a convo with Aoshima. Now, Aoshima tells them the mission of the Takahara Academy was to create a utopia. Then we get an interesting panel super early. Aoshima asks them if they know what a computer is. The whole time, the robot assistant that Sawatari had, RIP to Dr. Scarface, gone but not forgotten, that robot, quote unquote, is in the room. Kiruko, who is no stranger to faking it till he makes it, he says a computer is like the monitor or the robot in the room. Aoshima does a very second grade teacher move, the polite correction, where she points to the CPU, not the monitor, to say that's what a computer is. Then, Aoshima says there was a strong computer at Takahara named Meena. Meena was an AI. Both Kiruko and Maru were familiar with AI, robots that can think like a human. Initially, I'm reading this, and I'm slightly confused. Why didn't Aoshima just point to Sawatari's robot in the room to explain what Meena was? It seems like a no-brainer. Of course, by the end of the chapter, we learn why. We also know why the robot said it wasn't a medical robot in chapter 56. Back to it. Aoshima, still drunk off truth serum, is telling us everything she can remember about Meena. Meena's favorite color is shades of gray. Favorite TV show, Law & Order CPU. Favorite clothes, she likes booting up. I felt like she made me go on a speed date with Meena. Big reveal time. We learned that Takahara Academy volunteered staff. I don't even want to say volunteered, sacrificed staff, students and other candidates to help Meena learn medical science. That statement sounds so much more merciful than the reality. Understand, they were not giving Meena books on body parts and surgery or here's some stuff we saw on WebMD. No, they were connecting people to Meena while they were still alive and letting Meena do whatever the fuck type of experiment she wanted. In the grand scheme of things, the panel with the experimenting isn't that horrific, but if we pause and sit with this image or sit with this panel, it's actually super inhumane, even if it was consensual. There was no discussion on whether or not this was consensual, by the way, but we already know that they wouldn't have been bounded to conventional thoughts on morality in the first place. So even if it was consensual, they still would do it. Anywho, Kiruko's reaction to this revelation was half sarcastic, just saying wow, which is pretty hilarious, but also surprising for Aoshima. Remember, Aoshima doesn't fully appreciate what someone like Kiruko has seen and experienced already. Compared to bandits around every corner, fighting off man-eaters, losing all your loved ones, and being betrayed by the person you idolize the most, hearing about some AI ignoring the Geneva Convention is a drop in the bucket. Anyway, these experiments help Meena perfect gene editing, and she's able to create superhumans. Bucky Barnes, Captain America, hey Meena, can you make me 2 packs of Mr. Incredible? Coming right up. right? She's learning exactly what the formula should look like to whip up different types of powers. Meena would pump out all the kids at the facility on Izakanoe Island, aka Heaven. Meena gave birth to all of them through an artificial womb. Give her some sperm, eggs, and a little bit of milk and black pepper, and she can cook up all types of superhumans. Meat without animal killing, veggies that don't need to be farmed, and then beyond babies who would be birthed by Meena. What a great time to be alive. The plan was, after the Great Disaster, they would spread the gospel, like the Duggars, to the rest of Japan. Kiruko is hearing this, and even with a loosened or warped sense of morality from living in a fucking apocalypse, he immediately realizes that this is Twisted Metal Black. This is messed up. Aoshima reluctantly agrees that it was wrong, but basically confirms she understood and even supported it while she was on the island. She also says the Hiruko children were proof it must have been wrong since they were essentially cursed with the man-eater transformation, even though they were innocent. She says it was as if God punished them with a disease that turned them into monsters when they die. This is actually big because it confirms Shiro's hunch. Remember, Shiro said if you die before you get the disease, you die a human. If you die after you get the disease, you'll become a man-eater. This was just a theory. It was just as likely that all cores deteriorate, so effectively all the kids would become man-eaters if their core was not destroyed, by something like the Maru touch, for example. Aoshima pretty much rules out that possibility, so we can confirm the Shiro theory. Die without the disease, Hiruko won't become man-eater. Die after you contract the disease, then we're gonna have to cremate you or get Maru to touch you in the right places. Most interesting thing from this panel is that we get to see a new man-eater. They could have easily shown us Oma in the suspended state, or Kona's man-eater, or Taka at the hotel, or the racetrack man-eater. But they showed us a new one, which suggests another one of the kids who escaped from the facility got the disease and transformed. And I'm assuming this is the first man-eater transformation Aoshima got to see firsthand. Aoshima says that even though they had surveillance everywhere, Kona and Tokyo got pregnant. This is also big, maybe. At the very least, it was surprising to me because it shows she never fully put it all together or figured out what was going on. It seems she still didn't suspect Meena of meddling to get the kids to hook up. It's also noticeable that when Aoshima talks about the pregnancy and Kiruko says that's how we got Yamato and Maru, Aoshima does not come clean about the fact that one of them was a clone. She just ignores it and moves on to talking about the Nara and Ibaraki facilities as places they cloned meat and vegetables, and the plan was to start expansion after the Great Disaster, having additional heaven branches, growing kids in those locations as well. Then, we get another massive panel. Aoshima says that's why the Ministry of Reconstruction decided to put their HQ at those facilities, Nara and Ibaraki. And we get that picture. It seems obvious now, but yes, confirmation that Sawatari, Aoshima, and the kids they ran off with started the Ministry of Reconstruction. Kona, Yamato, Tokyo, Michika, Mako, Oma, Sawatari, Aoshima, and the robot that's looking more and more suspicious over time. I'll get into the rest of the people in this picture towards the end of this video because they show us who they are at the end. From this picture, there's only one person I can't identify. If you can identify them, let me know in the comments. Aoshima apologizes to Kiruko, who is now the lead delegate for the young generation apparently, and vows to rebuild the world. Then, Kiruko puts in an all-star rebuttal. He basically tells Aoshima we don't have a frame of reference for what life was like back then. Life after the Great Disaster is our default setting, it's all we know, that's our normal. He says they don't need pity from Sawatari and Aoshima. This isn't just a problem for them to solve. Then he does the old man knee grab and dips out with Maru. As they're walking back, Kiruko and Maru, who just learned the secret behind the man-eater transformation, realize that Maru might get the disease and transform as well. Kiruko does give some encouragement, to Maru by making it seem like his predicament isn't unique. Anyone can get sick and die. You're normal if you think about it like that. I don't know if it's encouragement, but it is a nice touch. And then the heartbreak. Maybe it's not heartbreak, but I know that I was reading too much into it pretty much immediately. The panel that made me think there's no chance for romance. We fast forward to present day, or present night since Maru's in bed, and he says whenever he gets to his destination, his time with Sis will come to an end. That's the only thing I'm sure of. God damn it, Maru. Already planned a whole rom-com spin-off movie for you and Kiruko. This was devastating for me, but I'm not even gonna analyze it, but I'll always remember that he said it. Moving on. The next day, our heroes, Kiruko and Maru, do the most familiar thing they've been doing all series, which is to say, look, we learned a bunch of stuff, knocked out our objectives, time to hit the road. So they head to the Juichi inheritance van and see that it's been upgraded by our good friends at the Ministry of Reconstruction. Very grateful that Maru and Kiruko took care of the Anzu problem, the Angelus. They installed a robot charging base, and that robot, quote unquote, that belonged to Sawatari is coming along for the adventure. The robot says it knows Yamato's last address and the location of Izukanoe Island because it used to live there. At this point, my eyebrow is raised like Carlo Ancelotti. I lean back on the couch. Wait, what? Used to live on the island? I'm trying to figure it out. I'm putting it together, but I'm suspicious. By the way, the story that's being spread to the masses is that the Sealing Squad took care of the Angelus, not Maru. Propaganda in full effect. Then we get a brief discussion on how Aoshima is a bureaucrat, strict, uptight, and follows all the rules. And I thought this was interesting. We have this young underling over here talking about injecting some life and banter into the ministry. He has no idea that Aoshima was using her clearance to sneak into rooms at Takahara. She's cloning Tokyo's kid and doing the Noah project to help some of the kids escape. When she was young, she was really doing her own thing. But it's all about perspective. Being young and rambunctious makes it hard to imagine any time when your superiors who seem rigid were just like you. Michika is done chasing Maru and Kiruko and tells some other people in her squad to report that they escaped. Since she's their most effective quote-unquote human weapon, she doesn't think they'll send anyone after them. Then we learn that they were assigned hats to wear as part of the uniform, but they don't like the hats, they don't want to wear them. Such bravery. For the record, I was inspecting the hell out of these hats, but they didn't have enough detail in the panels for me to really get any kind of significance out of it. Again, hit me in the comments if you learned anything from the logo on the hats. Next, as Maru and Kiruko drive to the next destination, we get the most discussed panel from this chapter. The robot, I'm still doing air quotes, says it's the first time out in a long time. Says it excitedly like Juichi with power tools, which Maru thinks is strange. The robot asks Maru to stop calling it a robot because it has a name. My name is Nata. I'm over here screaming in my living room. I'm Goku Super Saiyan 3 screaming. My legs are kicking. I finished it off with a let's go, followed by a salute to Sawatari. They still think it's a robot and Nata is the name of the model or it's an inherited name from the doctor, but the blessed reader knows that this is the girl whose body was stolen by the doctor and later became Mikura. So Sawatari, our favorite doctor since Patch Adams, he saved that poor girl's brain and put it in the robot. And now we're in the Ghost in the Shell domain. Ghost in the Shell, and I guess later on Cyberpunk Edgerunners, had different applications of something known as the Ship of Theseus. And this is a version of that philosophical argument that asks, at what point are you no longer you? So I could do a whole other video talking about, like, should we still consider this Nata? How much of the components have to change before Nata is no longer Nata? But I understand you're only here for me to talk about the chapter, so I'll talk about the chapter. Thankfully, we're in the home stretch. And now we can identify some of those extra people in the picture showing us the origin of the Ministry of Reconstruction. We've got Laima, we've got Hani, and we've got Momoika. Momoika is the girl that can do predictions. She's much more accurate than Mimihime, but she can't see as far as Mimihime from what I can tell. Laima and Hani got a cover, and when they got their cover, I remember thinking, this is strange. Why do they have their own cover? But now I can tell, all right, they were Hiruko children. I don't know what their powers are. I just know that they're currently DJs that work at the Ministry of Reconstruction. And then, of course, I warned you that there was a spoiler cover. So in a previous chapter, I believe chapter 52, the cover art was Nata sitting on the robot that she now inhabits. So yes, as always, they fucking told us, we just weren't paying attention. They keep doing this to me and I keep falling for it. Let me circle back really quickly before I wrap this up. Aoshima is determined to rebuild. Some of the younger generation upstarts who hate the hats left them behind on a ledge, which in the most basic level of analysis is strong symbolism because they don't have any concept of what these statues represent. We'll see new reverence for spirits or deities after the Great Disaster, but the ones that reigned during the old world is pretty much just useless decorations. I think it's obvious where we're going next. We're looking for Yamato, but What I really got from reading this chapter is how much they still have to fill in. There's a couple people who think that we're getting towards endgame. I do not think we're close to endgame at all. I think we have at least 40 more chapters to go. We still know very little things about how Meena was created in the first place. There's the ancient Hiruko that we really haven't discussed, and there's a lot more kids that haven't been identified and we know nothing about their whereabouts. Kiruko leaves the picture that she had of Sawatari with Aoshima, so that's the closure that she gets. You know, she likes to leave it behind when she's done with it, so she's done with her Robin chapter, even though we might run into Robin again later on. She's done with the Sawatari chapter, who turns out to be quite a likable character, even though he was initially thought to be a villain. And now the concentration is very much gonna be heavily skewed towards Maru's storyline, trying to find the person who has his face, Yamato, and then maybe a little bit more work on what was happening between the gap where we saw the Great Disaster and when we were first introduced to Maru and Kiruko. So still a lot to explain. There was a short period of time when it looked like we had so many revelations that we were just gonna have explanations for the rest of the story. But when I really sit back and think about how much we know at this current juncture, I can honestly say still almost just as many mysteries as when we started this whole wild ride. And so I'm sure Ishiguro is going to continue to set up great things. I'm going to be over here hoping that every Tengoku pack was as interesting as this one. I'll catch you in the next video. Talk to me in the comments. Bye.